When it comes to relative identity, I agree that the relative identity solution is only formally coherent, but I think it gives rise to other issues.
Did I hear that right? Did he just admit that the Trinity is formally consistent? Well, maybe the second clip will convince you guys.
Oh, I already told you that the relative identity solution is formally consistent.
Wait, he said it again? Okay. Maybe he just misspoke 2 times. Maybe a third time?
Under Peter Geach's relative identity, it would be coherent. It would be consistent.
Okay,
That
so
is a legitimate way
right.
of speaking
Okay,
as
so
of the Trinity as one God. But it arises.
Wait. So he explicitly stated that the Trinity is logically consistent. So what's the issue? I know it's a very common confusion that the logical problem of the Trinity is saying there's a formal issue with modeling the Trinity, right? It's not saying other issues, whether it's intelligible conceptually in its metaphysics, whether we're using some ad hoc metaphysics or whatnot. That's not what the logical problem of the Trinity is saying. The logical problem of the Trinity is saying there is no model that can express the statements that Trinitarians are trying to make. But the Muslim apologetic, there's a relative identity model. Now, stay tuned to watch the video because we're going to go over a lot of the objections that a lot of you Christians in my comments have been asking me to go over. Like, is polytheism impossible under relative identity? What the Hindu objection, are Hindus polytheists? It's arbitrary. And we're going to go over all of that, so make sure you watch till the end because we have a very educational video today for you guys. So let's get right into it.
Set up the Sortal God. What is the Sortal God there? What are the conditions in order to be identical to that Sortal?
So the Orthodox Muslim starts with a very common question when starting with relative identity. What are the conditions to be a part of the Sortal God in terms of the Trinity? Well, most Trinitarians, and I agree, will tell you that the necessary conditions are the omni properties. It's not anything more or less than that. That doesn't mean that the omni properties exhausts all the predicates of the divine essence. That just means that the omni properties are the conditions necessary for being identified as identical to that one God in the Sortal God.
So you're saying the Sortal there just picks out anything that has divine essence. There's
divine
one
nature.
divine essence.
I'll clarify. Divine.
Right.
I don't like
There's
the word
one.
divine essence. Divine nature.
So what if I choose to pick a Sortal called person? Person just means anything that has the qualities of personhood. And the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are the same person. What's wrong with that?
I have to respond to this. He says, what if I have a Sortal person and there's only one person in that Sortal? He says, what's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with that is that's not the Trinitarian position. When we're modeling a set of statements, we're trying to model the set of statements in question, namely the Trinitarian statements that we want to hold to. The Father is not the Son. So when you ask, if I have a Sortal person and I only have one person and Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit are just 3 names for the same person, that's modalism. That doesn't, you now are dealing with a different set of statements and you're modeling those statements. You've moved away from the question of whether or not we can model the theory in question. What's wrong with Tawheed if I say the attributes are identical to the divine essence? Well, absolute identity can deal with that. It can model that. But that's not the Islamic theory. Most Muslims don't say that. So I would be modeling someone else's theory. So what's wrong with that is that it's not what you believe. It's a very trivial thing. And he tries to use this sophistic language in order to confuse the Christian.
Incorrect with that? Is that what you mean by wrong? Or are you asking me
Under relative identity, is there anything wrong with that? formally.
He says, under relative identity, is there anything wrong with that? And clearly what he's asking is, can relative identity, or does relative identity have the expressive power to model that? It does. It has the expressive power to model that, just like absolute identity has the expressive power to model that Allah is identical to his attributes. Or it's able to model that there's 3 Allahs. But that's not the Muslim position. I would be modeling a different theory, again, which is a complete just diversion from the actual debate on whether or not we can express the set of statements, which he already agreed we can. So I don't know why he's asking this question, because this question, he's just asking if we can build a model that satisfies some set of statements. Obviously, you can build a model for modalism under absolute identity and relative identity, just like you can build a model that models tritheism under the Tawheed commitments, but it wouldn't be your theory. It would be someone else's theory, or it would be a complete, just random diversion from the point at hand.
At least the Christians that would agree with me, we wouldn't count God in that way.
Exactly. That's why I said it's completely arbitrary. Okay?
He then says, that's why I'm saying it's completely arbitrary, because the logical structure of identity can model different commitments. Well, if that's what you're saying is arbitrary, then Tawheed is arbitrary, or any way you model Tawheed is arbitrary with absolute identity, because absolute identity can model other commitments that you don't hold to. It can model there being 3 gods. It can model there being multiple persons in Allah. It can model Allah being identical to all of his attributes. But that's not what Muslims hold to, which is the point. So if arbitrariness is the product of an identity relation that's able to withhold other commitments, other statements, and model them, then this is contradictory, because what he wants to model can be modeled in absolute identity, but other commitments that he doesn't hold to can be modeled under absolute identity.
Completely arbitrary. Okay? When you're setting up this relative identity relation, you're setting it up in a way that already begs the question. Okay?
Okay.
He says when you're setting up this identity relation, you're already setting it up in a way that begs the question. It just shows the fundamental confusion he has. He doesn't know what modeling is. When we're trying to model something, we're trying to model the set of statements in question. The set of statements, whether taken to be true, taken to be false, irrelevant. Whether they match reality or they don't, irrelevant. The point is that the model is supposed to see if it can withhold those set of statements without causing some formal inconsistency. And he's saying that if you can model something with your set of commitments, but it can also model other commitments, then it's arbitrary. No, it's not arbitrary, because the point of trying to model is to see if it can be consistent, if there can be at least one model for those set of statements. Now, he admitted there is a model for the set of statements, so it isn't consistent. It's not arbitrary because there's other set of statements that it could model, because absolute identity, as I already said, can model other sets of statements that he doesn't hold to, just like he tried to model modalism, and clearly it can be modeled. But that's not what we hold to. So why is he trying to model that? That makes absolutely no sense. He's trying to divert from the point to try to confuse the Christian, and he doesn't know what the purpose of modeling is.
No, I already told you that the relative identity solution is formally consistent. I already told you that. But the issues I have would be other issues that arise that are counterintuitive.
So again, he says the relative identity solution is formally consistent, meaning that there is at least one model for the set of statements that Trinitarians want to make under relative identity, and that those statements are formally consistent, meaning there is no logical problem with the Trinity, again. But then he says he has some counterintuitive issues with the Trinity. Well, what are those counterintuitive issues? Again, he tries to go back to saying that because we can model other statements with that identity relation that we don't hold to as Trinitarians, that's counterintuitive against the view of relative identity. How is that a defeater against relative identity? The purpose of relative identity is to model not just Trinitarian commitments, but other set of statements, and it was created to deal with certain issues with the absolute identity relation of the identity operator. And so, like, what's the issue there? It's counterintuitive because we can model other statements. Again, we can model other statements with absolute identity like his. We can model that Allah is identical to the attributes. He doesn't hold to that. Is that a reason to reject absolute identity? No, because he doesn't know what the purpose of modeling is.
Other issues that arise that are counterintuitive, like this, for example. Why choose this sortal to be this way and not any other way, right? Where you would have one person and three gods. Well, you just say, well, because our doctrine doesn't allow it. It just begs the question. It's arbitrary, right?
He says, why choose the sortal to be this way and not any other way? Well, because we're trying to model the Trinitarian commitment. We're not trying to model Hinduism. We're not trying to model Zeus and the other gods. We're trying to model the Trinitarian commitments. And the Trinitarian commitments is that there is one God and there's three persons. That's not begging the question. That's what we do when we model. That's what everyone does when they model. They take their set of statements and they see if there's at least one model that can hold those set of statements consistently. That's what it is.
Another issue you would have is relative identity makes polytheism impossible. You agree?
All right, we've gotten to a very popular objection of relative identity that I've seen flying around TikTok by you Muslims. Relative identity makes polytheism impossible. And this shows you are, if you were going around saying this, you are confused. You have no idea what relative identity is. As you literally, it's impossible to be a polytheist. False. False. Let's model it. There's two gods under the sortal God. That would make you a polytheist automatically. If I said there's two gods and those two gods are the same person and there's one person, that would make someone a polytheist. Relative identity can model that. I have no clue what he's on about. He's just stating this. So let's continue to see what he says.
Yes, under relative identity. If a Hindu,
Yeah, I'll tell you.
just one sec. If a Hindu articulates his doctrine and adopts relative identity, would he be a monotheist?
So, Hindus, and you could look this up. They don't believe in they believe in one God. I forgot the name of it, but he has multiple different forms.
I understand.
They believe it's one person that has multiple.
I understand. I understand.
They don't believe it's
you're
polytheism.
focused.
This goes directly into the other objection that is very common. Are Hindus polytheists under relative identity? The Christian answers correctly. Basically what he says, it depends on the metaphysics. So he says Hindus believe that there is one God with different manifestations. So if we were to model that, there would be one God under the sortal God. And maybe there'd be different persons, or maybe you set up a sortal for manifestation or whatever. And if you're a Hindu that believes that, you would be a monotheist because you believe there's one God under the sortal God. Now look what Libiano tries to do with his sleight of hand here.
But you're focusing too much on the wrong thing. If a Hindu says, "I believe in 30 million gods," but in order to fix that, I'm gonna set up a count sortal where God picks out any divine entity, and person picks out an individual divine entity, and that way I have one God and many divine persons. Under that proposed solution, would this hypothetical Hindu be a monotheist?
So listen to what he just said. He said the Hindu comes up to you and says, I believe in whatever, 300,000 gods. So he placed 300,000 distinct gods under the Sortal God. That is polytheism. But he then goes and tries to trick the Christian by saying the Hindu tries to solve this. What would the Hindu be trying to solve? He just declared he believes in 300,000 gods. That's polytheism. And then Orthodox Muslim says he tries to solve this by saying there's one God with different persons, different manifestations. Well, then did the Hindu lie? It's one or the other. The Hindu believes there's 300,000 gods, or the Hindu believes there's one God. It doesn't matter if you define God with the divine essence or whatnot. He's just switching the Hindu commitment in the middle of the argument. You can't say, well, I believe in three gods, but I believe in one God because there's one divine essence. It's one or the other. And he's trying to confuse the Christian by acting as if you can simultaneously believe there's 300,000 gods under the Sortal and then believe there's one God under Sortal. It's one or the other. If the Hindu believes that there's three under the God Sortal, then you're a polytheist. If the Hindu believes that there's one under the God Sortal, then you're a monotheist. Same with Muslims. If you believe there's one God under the God Sortal, you're a monotheist. If you believe there's three under the God Sortal, you're a polytheist. Same with Christians. If you believe there's one God under the God Sortal, the divine essence, whatever, you're a monotheist. If you believe there's three, you're a polytheist. Polytheism is not impossible under relative identity. That is the dumbest thing I've heard in a while. And not only that, it drives us away from the question to whether or not your metaphysical commitments force you to model this in such a way that it is polytheistic. He says, so then polytheism is impossible under review. He actually implicitly implied that polytheism is possible because he said the Hindu is trying to fix something. What is the Hindu trying to fix under relative identity? Well, he is implying that the 300,000, if taken to be God or divine essences, would make the Hindu a polytheist. Is he not implying that? If there isn't one God under the God Sortal, then how many is there? If the set isn't empty, it's 2 or 3 or 4. What is that if not polytheism? In order to try to create this sophistry, he had to take the Hindu commitment, go from 300,000 and say, well, actually, the Hindu believes there's 300,000 gods, but now the Hindu believes there's one God. Is he a monotheist? Okay. This is one piece of paper. Actually, it's 300,000 pieces of paper. How many pieces of paper is this? That's the equivalent to what he just asked. Well, which one is it? Is it one? What's the commitment? What's the statement we're trying to model? Is it that there's one piece of paper or that there's 300,000?
And it makes polytheism impossible, and it redefines monotheism. Monotheism is no longer a primitive notion. It's just whatever you want it to be.
Yeah,
So this is the crux of the matter. He's saying, if you have one God under the God Sortal, there can't be polytheism. That's because there's one God under the God Sortal. If you have one thing, there can't be two. Okay, Orthodox Muslim, you're a genius. You figured it all out. 3 is not 4. 1 is not 3. What is he trying to do? If this applies to his model of Allah as well, he's going to have one Allah. If there's one Allah, there's not 3 Allahs. So polytheism is impossible. Do you Muslims accept that under absolute identity? No. Polytheism is possible under absolute identity because you guys constantly try to argue that the logical problem of the Trinity creates 3 gods. Well, if it creates 3 gods, then obviously polytheism is possible, but you Muslims believe that your model contains one God. Well, if there's one God, then there's not 3. That doesn't mean that you can't model 3 gods. Just like here, if there's one God under the God Sortal and there's not 3, there's one God. There's not 3 gods. That doesn't mean it's impossible to model 3 gods. That just means with the set of statements given the Trinitarian commitments, constructing a model, there is one God. It's not that difficult, and we need to stop this sophistry immediately. Here's another just confused statement. It redefines monotheism. It does not redefine monotheism. Monotheism is the belief that there is one God. Under relative identity, the set of statements that the Trinitarian wants to hold to includes the belief that there is one God. That's the monotheistic statement that's being modeled. Same thing with the Muslim. We believe there is one God. You then take that and then you then model it. You can model that under relative identity just like you can model it under absolute identity. There is no issue there.
Some people hold to pure relative identity, where normal articulations like Jesus is X or Y is F are literally incoherent. That's Peter Geach's view, by the way. So you don't hold to Peter Geach's view all the way, because Peter Geach finds that normal identity statements are gibberish.
Okay, this is a very common confusion. And he's just misunderstanding what relative identity is doing. He's misunderstanding what logical identity is doing at all. Logical and relative identity is not saying that when we normally go around and we say Juju is the same human as Orthodox Muslim or whatever, it's not saying that that is incoherent, right? Relative identity or logicians aren't making a claim about ordinary language. They're making a claim about what ordinary language would translate into in a formal one. That's what they're saying. It's changing the logical structure of identity. It's not saying me and my friend look at a tree and we say that's the same type of tree as this and whatever. It's not making a claim about whether or not that's absolute or relative identity until we model it, until we start talking about formal systems. So it's not this like counterintuitive thing where you're able to go around and just empirically see relative identity or absolute identity. That's not what's happening.
Okay, so now you're just throwing out the Bible. Does the Bible make statements?
What?
Yeah.
Wait, how did you get that conclusion?
I'll tell you.
How did I throw out the Bible?
Okay, I'm gonna tell you. Okay, does Peter Geach think that it's coherent to make normal absolute identity statements?
Absolute identity is not coherent at all.
Okay, does the Bible make absolute identity statements?
I don't think the Bible uses any form of identity statements. Like
The Bible doesn't use
I think
identity.
it talks about things.
The
but I
Bible
don't think it itself uses an identity system.
does the Bible say Jesus is the Son of Man?
Yeah, it does say that.
Is that a normal identity statement?
It's just a
Wow. This is like a new level of confusion. It's like as the video goes on, he gets more and more confused and more confident. Does the Bible make absolute identity statements? I didn't know that according to Orthodox Muslim, the Bible is a book teaching logic. Maybe you guys knew that. Where in the Bible is it expressing any formal language? Does this guy, again, thinks that just by reading a statement, if I say, this dog is a cat, or whatever, this dog is an animal, he thinks that that automatically translates into some formal language just by saying that set of statement. That's not true. In many ordinary language statements, it is obvious to see that there's an identity statement being made, but that doesn't mean it tells you what is the logical structure of that identity statement. It doesn't tell you that. A lot of statements don't even tell you whether or not we're differentiating from the is of predication and the is of identity, let alone the structure of identity. So you cannot just look at the Bible and say, Jesus is God, and say, well, that is committing you to saying, that's an is of identity. That's an is of predication, let alone saying that this is telling me something about the logical structure of identity. The Bible is not a logic book. It's not teaching you formal structures. We create formal systems in order to model them, and then we deal with them within those formal languages. We're not looking at the Bible and deriving it from that. The modeling is used to express the set of statements. It's not backwards. It goes from the set of statements to the modeling, not from modeling to the set of statements. So the rest of the video is him talking about neoclassical theism and nonsense, but I hope you guys seen how this guy is a sophist. Guy has no clue what relative or even absolute identity is. And for the last thing, a lot of you guys are asking me to go up on his panel and debate him. You guys have hopefully seen in this video that this guy is a sophist. I will not go up on his panel to debate him. I will debate him if we have a formal debate where someone is moderating. I will not debate him where he has the power to mute me, where there's not allotted time. And that's to try to minimize the sophistry that this guy is going to try to do. So if you guys want me to debate him, unless it's a formal debate, if it's a formal debate, I will absolutely accept it. I will not accept any informal debate with sophists.